In Anambra, snakes are never killed, but on their way to marry Chukwudi's girlfriend, his family broke the law, and something unseen followed them home. Nobody warned Chukwudi that the road into his girlfriend's village carried rules older than memory. He had been to Anambra many times before, but never this far, never this deep. The road narrowed as their car moved away from the main town, trading asphalt for red earth, cell service for silence. Palm trees leaned inward like quiet witnesses. The air felt thicker, heavier, as if the land itself was listening. Chukwudi sat in the back seat beside his mother, pride swelling in his chest. This was not just a visit. This was tradition. He was bringing his family to formally ask for Adi's hand in marriage. He had loved her for years. She was gentle, respectful, rooted. Everything his parents prayed for. The family was happy. His father joked. His uncles laughed. His mother kept adjusting her wrapper, rehearsing greetings in her head. Goats bleated in the trunk of the pickup behind them. Wine clinked softly. It was a good day. Until the snake crossed the road. It happened quickly. A long, dark snake slithered out from the bushes, slow and unbothered, stretching across the dusty path as if it owned it. The driver slammed the brakes. The car jerked to a stop. "What nonsense is this?" one uncle scoffed. Before anyone could say more, Chukwudi's younger cousin jumped out, grabbed a thick stick from the roadside, and struck the snake hard. Once. Twice. Again. The snake writhed, then went still. There was laughter. "Village nonsense," someone said. They dragged the lifeless snake off the road and continued their journey without a second thought. No one noticed how the air shifted. No one noticed the sudden quiet of the birds. No one asked why the snake had crossed their path so calmly. They arrived at Adi's village to warm smiles and careful hospitality. Her parents welcomed them with kolanut and palm wine. The elders spoke gently. The women moved with purpose. Everything followed tradition. Only Adi's felt uneasy. She noticed it when the elders exchanged glances as the visitors arrived. She noticed the way her grandmother stared at the road long after the car parked. She noticed the silence that settled when someone mentioned the journey. That night, she dreamed of a snake lying in the center of the village square, wrapped in white cloth, surrounded by mourners. She woke with her heart racing. She said nothing. Chukwudi returned to the city days later, bride price negotiations underway, his mind already planning the wedding. Life moved forward. Until it didn't. The first death came quietly. An uncle collapsed in his sleep. No illness. No warning. The doctor said stress. They buried him and moved on. Then another. A cousin fell ill suddenly, complaining of seeing things crawling on the walls. He died before morning. That was when the snakes began to appear. They would see one coiled near the front door. Another under a bed. One in the kitchen, resting calmly near the cooking pots. Every time they screamed and called for help, the snake disappeared. No trace. No sound. Fear entered the house like smoke. Night after night, Chukwudi dreamed of the same road. The same snake. Always watching him. Never attacking. Just watching. His mother started waking up at night, whispering prayers. His father grew thinner, quieter, distracted. The house that once echoed with laughter now held only tension. When his father died suddenly, slumping over his plate during dinner, the family broke. This was no longer coincidence. This was a message. They ran from church to church, prayer house to prayer house. Pastors prayed. Prophets shouted. Holy water flowed. Fasting followed. Nothing changed. The snakes kept coming. And somewhere deep inside Chukwudi, a memory stirred, the dusty road, a stick raised, a snake killed without thought. But he didn't yet understand what that memory truly meant. After the burial of Chukwudi's father, the house changed in ways no prayer could touch. The compound that once felt alive now breathed fear. Doors were locked even during the day. Windows stayed shut. Nobody sat outside after sunset. Every small sound carried weight. Every shadow felt washed. And the snakes kept coming. They never attacked. They never hissed. They never chased anyone. They simply appeared. One would be seen stretched along the corridor wall, its body resting calmly like a guest who had arrived early. Another would curl beside the water drum. Sometimes one lay at the foot of the bed, head raised, eyes steady, as if waiting to be acknowledged. Each time someone screamed or called neighbors, the snake vanished. No blood. No tracks. No proof. Only fear. Chukwudi's mother stopped sleeping. She prayed until her voice cracked, clutching her rosary until her fingers ached. She anointed doors. She sprinkled holy water. She called pastors at midnight. Nothing stopped the visits. The pastor spoke confidently at first. It is spiritual attack. It is witchcraft. It is ancestral manipulation. They prayed loudly. They fasted the family. They demanded offerings. They promised deliverance. But the snakes returned. One night, Chukwudi woke up drenched in sweat, his heart pounding. He had dreamed his father stood at the edge of the road where the snake had died, pointing silently at the ground. When Chukwudi looked down, he saw loose red soil, freshly disturbed, like a grave that had been abandoned halfway. That morning, he remembered. The snake. The road. The laughter. The stick. He told his mother. At first, she dismissed it. It was just an animal, she said, though her voice shook. People kill snakes every day. But doubt had already entered her eyes. Chukwudi called her this. When he mentioned the snake, her silence lasted too long. You didn't know, she finally asked. Know what? Her voice dropped. In my village, we don't kill snakes. His chest tightened. She explained slowly, carefully, like someone touching an old wound. In her village, snakes were not ordinary creatures. They were sacred. Messengers. Guardians. Tied to the land long before the first houses were built. If a snake entered your path, it was a greeting. A sign of acceptance. If one died by accident, it had to be buried like a human being. With rights. With respect. Chukwudi felt cold spread through him. He told her how it had happened. Adis began to cry. This is not something prayers alone can fix, she said. This is tradition. You offended what protects us. Fear now had a name. They went back to the churches anyway. Desperation pushed them forward. One prophet shouted that the snakes were demons pretending to be harmless. Another said the family had enemies. Another demanded a night vigil on the mountain. They climbed mountains. They poured oil. They screamed prayers into the night. Still, the snakes came. Then one evening, an old neighbor came quietly and sat outside the compound. He waited until Chukwudi noticed him. There are things older than churches, the man said softly. And they don't like being ignored. He gave them a name. A native doctor. Not just any native doctor. One known for speaking to the land, not fighting it. Chukwudi resisted at first. Fear mixed with pride. But death had already taken too much. Pride felt small now. They went. The native doctor lived far from the city, close to the bush where silence felt intentional. His shrine was simple. Clean. Calm. No drama. He listened without interruption. Then he nodded. You killed what came to welcome you, he said. And you left it unburied. That is why it comes back. Chukwudi's knees weakened. The snake did not come to harm you, the man continued. It came to greet the son-in-law. To bless the journey. You mistook peace for danger. The snakes, he explained, were not attacks. They were reminders. Visits. Calling the family to correct what had been done. There is only one solution, the native doctor said. You must return to that road. Find the place. Bury the snake properly. Perform the rites. Apologize to the land. And if we don't? Chukwudi asked, though he already knew the answer. The land does not forget, the man replied. That night, for the first time in months, no snake appeared. But the silence did not feel like peace. It felt like waiting. They returned to the road at dawn. Not with laughter. Not with confidence. But with bowed heads and careful steps. Chukwudi led the way this time. His mother walked beside him, thinner now, quieter. His remaining uncles followed behind, carrying what the native doctor instructed them to bring: white cloth, kola nut, palm wine, a small goat, and a shovel that felt heavier than it should. The road looked ordinary. Red earth. Tall grasses. Silence. If not for memory, no one would have known anything had ever happened there. They searched slowly, guided by instinct and unease, until Chukwudi stopped. This is the place, he said. The ground looked slightly different, darker, as if it had never fully healed. The native doctor knelt and pressed his palm to the soil. He closed his eyes. He did not chant. He did not shout. He nodded once. They dug. Not deep at first. Then deeper. The earth gave way easily, as though it had been waiting. When the shovel struck something firm, everyone froze. They uncovered the snake's remains. Dry. Cold. Still. Chukwudi felt his chest tighten. The memory of that day returned fully now, the careless laughter, the dismissal, the ignorance wrapped in confidence. They washed the remains gently, wrapped them in white cloth, and laid them in the grave like a body that had waited too long for respect. The native doctor spoke then, his voice steady and low. This land was not angry, he said. It was wounded. They poured palm wine onto the soil. Kola nut was broken. Words of apology were spoken, not rushed, not defensive. Honest. Humble. Human. Chukwudi knelt. I did not know, he said, his voice cracking. But ignorance still causes harm. Forgive us. The goat was offered. The rites were completed. The earth was closed again, this time properly, carefully, with intention. When they finished, the air felt lighter. Not dramatic. Not miraculous. Just settled. They returned home quietly. That night, for the first time since his father's death, the house slept. No snakes. No shadows. No fear breathing through the walls. Days passed. Then weeks. No one fell sick. No one dreamed of roads or watching eyes. No snake appeared in any corner of the house. Life, slowly, returned. Chukwudi's mother laughed again, softly at first, like she was afraid to trust it. Neighbors began to visit without fear. The house breathed again. They went back to Adi's village, not as offenders, but as people who had learned. The elders listened. They nodded. They accepted the apology. No anger remained. Only relief. The wedding went ahead, quieter than first imagined, but deeper. More grounded. More aware. Years later, when Chukwudi's first son asked why his grandmother always poured a little drink on the ground before celebrations, she smiled and said, "So we never forget who was here before us." because the land had taught them something prayers alone could not. That respect is not weakness. That tradition is not superstition. That some guardians do not roar or strike, they watch. And that peace returns not when you fight what you do not understand, but when you listen. From that day on, no snake ever crossed their path again. Not because the land was gone, but because it had been answered.